Hey everyone, this is Geronimo from the Beyond Taboo podcast, and I'm here with Erin Alexander, our sexologist. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, right, Erin?
Yes, we are.
Mhm. Today we'll talk about porn, porn consumption, but mainly, well, still today, a lot of people feel a little bit guilty when they're watching porn. So we find that sometimes it's difficult to determine or to know when, for example, we're watching too much, or where to find that sort of fine line that defines what a responsible um, relationship with porn can be. So I'm sure, Erin, you have encountered this topic a lot of time with your clients. So I'd love if you could tell us or explain to us how do you sort of encounter this problem with your clients.
Okay. Well, it's it can be kind of complicated because many times um, it will be because of maybe a partner will think that the person has some sort of addiction because whatever's
Mm,
happening, it's impacting the relationship. For example, a partner may think watching pornography is cheating, or
mm,
someone there's something going on in the relationship, and porn is the porn viewing is taking up a lot of quality time in the relationship. Or sometimes
the
the
libido
person,
also, right?
yes, yeah, the person may believe that the viewing of pornography is having an impact on erection problems,
Hmm,
or sometimes the partner just doesn't like pornography, like for religious
hmm,
reasons, or not being very educated about it, or they
hmm,
have certain beliefs like it causes violence or
hmm,
can cause addiction, or it's
hmm,
wrong or selfish to view pornography and not be spending time with a partner, or
hmm.
people should feel bad or secretive when they're watching porn. Sometimes people do feel that when they're watching pornography,
Okay.
or guilt and shame and so forth.
So, but for example, what could be some possible steps to take, or maybe let's say some hints or signals? Maybe first we can start with a sort of individual perspective rather than in a relationship. So, for example, um, what hints could someone take to determine, okay, maybe, I mean, maybe I'm watching too much porn, I mean, when can we tell that our relationship with it is going a bit out of our control?
Okay, well, first of all, I would ask the person, um, how much porn are they watching? Um, is it 2 or 3 times a week? Is it every day? And then I also want to get their definition of pornography, because that's changed over time.
Oh,
So
that's
50
interesting.
years ago, pornography was probably a Playboy magazine,
Hmm.
okay? And today, pornography, it's not just what you see online, like with Pornhub or something like that. It could be like one of the OnlyFans
Hmm.
sites, or sometimes people may be scrolling through
Twitter.
Instagram or something like that, or Tumblr, or what used to be Twitter.
Hmm.
And that's what people have told me. Like, sometimes they view that as pornographic. And so
Hmm.
it's important to get a definition of, well, what do you view as pornography? And then how often are you viewing pornography? Or is it taking up time where you should be working? Are you viewing pornography at work? Um, and so that would mean that there's some sort of dysfunction if it's taking away from daily activities, or
Okay.
taking away from the relationship and things like that.
Or maybe when you're finding yourself um, perpetrating or sort of doing that habit out of the, let's say, base, you should be doing so, right? I mean, you mentioned work, for
Yes.
example. So I guess that's something that can be a hint for many people.
Yes, that has happened, where people can get in trouble at work using um, computers that belong to the workplace, and
Hmm.
so that's not allowed. It's against policy.
Hmm.
You're putting your job in jeopardy. And so if things like that are happening, then I would say that viewing the pornography, we're getting into an area of where there's some compulsivity problems. And so that is the issue that would need to be addressed. What's going on there, not necessarily the pornography. It's what's going on that's causing someone to engage in some reckless behavior.
Okay, you mentioned a sort of subjective definition the concept of porn can have, I guess.
Hmm.
So I guess also compulsivity can depend on each individual, right? Because you initially mentioned one of the first questions you ask to your clients is the level of frequency they find themselves watching porn.
Hmm.
So is there, for example, or maybe this number does not help at all? I mean, for example, can we find an answer to our own relationship with this sort of content depending on the amount or frequency we watch it during the week? Or for example, even if I watch porn every day, for example, there may be a healthy relationship there? Or how can we determine that?
Oh, I think people can absolutely view pornography every day if it's not interfering with other things that you have to do, like going to work. If you have healthy relationships,
Hmm.
um, there isn't a problem with it, and I think that's where the problem lies. People associate negativity with the
Okay.
viewing of pornography, and that's something that we have to sort out. What is there really a problem? Okay, we have
Okay.
to
It makes
associate some
sense.
sex positivity with it because there's sex negativity associated with the viewing of pornography.
Okay. So maybe in a sense we could think that it starts to get out of control when, well, you mentioned when it starts to interfere with other aspects of our lives, right? Like, um, yeah, I mean, you mentioned work. What other hints? I mean, for example, if I'm if I'm uncertain about my relationship with porn and I feel a little bit guilty, what should be the steps I should take first to, let's say, understand maybe my relationship with it, and secondly, determine if it's affecting my life?
If someone is using words like guilt and shame, then that would be an indicator that they need to see a mental health professional because those are pretty deep um, negative feelings, and we need to get to what's the root cause of that. Why is there an association between guilt or shame and the use of pornography? Where is that coming from? Is it about I was taught this when I
Hmm.
was young, that sex is bad, or viewing
Okay.
pornography is bad, or sex
Okay.
outside of marriage is bad. And so they're
Hmm.
associating those things. So we would need to get to that, or maybe something bad happened to the person, and then they're making some negative association. So a mental health professional would have to get to that part. And then
Hmm.
again, we need to move over to the use of pornography in moderation and associating it with sex positivity.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a huge problem, Erin. I'm there with you, and I think, for example, there are new discourses that aren't contributing to a healthy relationship with porn as society. For
Hmm.
example, I'm not sure what you think, but I really get the feeling, for example, that there are a couple of probably not so new discourses among men and in masculinity in general that sort of associate the consumption of porn with the idea of being unproductive, like, well, men need to be productive, and the relationship with porn sort of affects their productivity or sort of means you're a failure. And I think that that a sort of association, has, well, it's really deep now. I mean, you get to see lots of different YouTube channels of, well, sort of gurus or probably anybody talking about this topic, which is completely fine. But I wonder how much this is affecting a healthy relationship with porn as a society. For example, take the I'd love to know your thoughts about this phenomena. But for example, the no-fap community, for example, which has a strong moral perspective about this cultural content or product. What do you
Okay.
think about what's being happening there?
Okay. Well, I've heard about that, and there is no research or data to support the no-fap. So that's not something that I encourage with my clients because there's really no research to support it. But if
Mm,
people want to do that for whatever reason and it's beneficial for them, then I encourage them to do that, just like I would if somebody wants to go to church and use that as a support system, then they do that. But as a clinician, I can't recommend something um, if there's no clinical any empirical data to
mm,
support something. I can't use it as like an intervention or a treatment. But if someone's using it as like a support or something like that, then I encourage them to do it. But like about productivity, I don't think the viewing of pornography has anything to do with productivity,
mm,
or if you're talking about masturbation, because we absolutely encourage masturbation. That's good
mm,
for your health. It's good for
mm,
stress management. It's good for just having me time.
mm,
Um, so if that's what pornography is being used for masturbation purposes, then we absolutely encourage that, whether you're in a relationship or not.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also think it does not have at all with something due to productivity or related to productivity. But I find it interesting to see how some of these perspectives proliferate, maybe. Uh, and I think in some way, well, seeing these sort of new discourses emerging reveal somehow that there's still a huge moral view about porn in general.
Mhm.
So how would you suggest or recommend, for example, if I'm in a relationship and I'm having trouble with my couple when watching porn? I mean, she or maybe him, they don't like when I watch porn. So how would I approach a communication to sort of, if it's possible, help my partner accept my relationship with porn?
Okay. So let me give eh, uh, an example of what that
Okay.
might look like.
Okay.
Um, if it is something excessive, okay, for example, if it's porn use or um, any other kind of what we would call an out of control sexual behavior,
Hmm.
it could be this is what we would be addressing
Hmm.
if somebody's doing something like that. We will be addressing the secrecy, the deception associated with the activities. If it involves spending money from the family account without
Okay.
discussion with the partner, or poor boundaries with other people, or
Hmm.
like those types of things would be the specific things that we would be addressing with the client and with the partner, because those are the things that would impact the relationship, not necessarily the pornography viewing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay.
Okay. Because usually they're being deceptive about it. It's not about, a guy saying, okay, well, I'm watching porn. It's they're hiding it,
Hmm.
lying about it, those types of things. And that's usually what is more hurtful in the relationship, the betrayal, the deception, those types of things. And then if there is anything like spending money on, the OnlyFans and things like that, and then that
Hmm.
that wasn't discussed, those are the types of things that are very relevant in the relationship that we would need to have conversations about. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting that you bring this up because, well, maybe I'm wrong, but the idea of hiding it makes me think that that person is already thinking that their partner is going to receive badly the idea of them. I mean, they haven't even presented it, but they already even having this misconception of porn themselves uh, before having even introduced the idea to the partner. So I think that's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so how would you, I mean, you mentioned the idea of defining boundaries and possible reckless behaviors when it comes to, well, using the money of the family to buy adult content and
Hmm.
else. So, what could be the steps to take from there for the couple? Sorry, to accept the relationship with it. You know.
Okay. Well, you mentioned boundaries. So let's say,
Hmm.
for example, um, the guy starts being honest or transparent about the use of
Hmm.
porn. So then we
Hmm.
move over to setting some boundaries or agreements with the use of porn. Like,
Okay.
all right, not using pornography in their bedroom, okay, because the bedroom is a place of, sanctuary or intimacy sanctuary. And so that would not be a place where pornography is viewed. Okay.
Okay.
That could be a very good boundary. And that is one that often, we agree with when I do the couple sessions. Okay. Is that what you're referring to?
Uh, does this mean, Erin, should we always be transparent about what we do with porn? I mean,
No, not like you're thinking, just the fact that it's being done. Okay.
okay,
That the person is viewing porn and not just completely not being deceptive about it, because that's
okay,
usually what's going on. Or
okay,
the guy will say, no, I'm not watching porn, or I stopped watching porn 5 years ago, when really that has not happened. They've been watching
okay,
porn every day
hmm,
for the last 5 years. So that's what
hmm,
I'm talking about. They
okay.
need to be transparent and say, well, of course I watch porn, and this is how often I watch porn.
So in a sense, it usually that sort of deception is usually triggered by the idea that porn will be bad for the relationship.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Or just feeling the guilt or shame or whatever the negativity is prior to even being in the relationship, because there's always been some negative association with sexuality in general in Western culture. There's
Hmm.
negativity, and then so when you put porn is under that umbrella, and so of course there's a negative association with the viewing of pornography. And so our goal is to try to pull it away from that and then associate some positivity to it, as long as we're removing the other things, making sure the person has guardrails or he comes up with his own guardrails with the use of pornography. And then there's
Hmm.
better communication and transparency with a partner.
Hmm, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, Erin, what do you think someone should say if they would like their partner to understand their relationship with porn and not feel insecure about it. I mean, in the scenario that there aren't any boundaries being transgressed or there's no deception at all, but
Mhm.
we find or we sort of have the feeling that our partner feels a little bit insecure about, well, me watching porn, probably, I don't know, about the possible female artists we're watching, or how what would someone need to say, or how would someone need to make their partner feel to accept this relationship and feel good about it, or make it more natural, if you will.
I usually recommend that when people get into relationships, make sure that discussing sex is a priority. Usually people don't do that. They don't talk about sex. Say
Hmm.
how important it is to you. And if exploration is important to you, bring that up. And if you
Hmm.
enjoy watching pornography, bring that up so that
Hmm.
it's not discovered 5 years into the relationship. You bring it up at the very beginning so that it can be discussed at the very beginning of the relationship. So you can give the other person an opportunity to, say yes or no. I can't deal with this in the relationship, or it encourages open dialogue about sexuality in general. So
Hmm.
that's the number one thing. And
Okay.
then once you get past that, like if sometimes people want to do things like, okay, well, I'm using this for stress management or me time.
Hmm.
Sometimes people want to watch pornography together. Sometimes
Hmm.
people use it for fantasy or, like I
Hmm.
said earlier, or exploration. And so it
Hmm.
really does encourage open communication. It's just one type of sex, as I see it, the viewing of pornography. And men tend to be more visual anyway. And so having that conversation, I think, is very important. And then letting
Hmm.
the partner know, just because I watch pornography does not take anything away from what I feel about you or how I feel about you.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Or what you make me feel, or
Hmm.
yeah, exactly. I guess also a good idea could be probably ensuring, well, that there's a active sex life with my partner, right? I
Yes.
mean, if
Hmm.
if I'm all day talking about the porn I watch to my couple and don't have any sex, well, yeah, I would worry maybe.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. Yes. It can't take the place of your relationship or the sex or intimacy that you have in your relationship. That
hmm,
absolutely can't happen.
yeah, well, I sort with time, it's sort of normal to get a little bit more probably. Well, we all say at some point the usual, I'm a little bit too tired for sex, and the desire tends to get a little bit selfish with time, maybe.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think maybe there probably needs to be a balance there. um but it's interesting. So, Erin, another question I was wondering while you were talking. So you mentioned, let's say I'm a person that find it difficult to determine, well, when I'm watching too much, or if I'm approaching to porn in a healthy way. So let's say I determine, okay, maybe I'm watching too much. What would be the steps to take in this case for me to work for a better, more probably healthier relationship with porn? Should I completely stay away from it? How can I find the balance if I'm already having some difficulties in managing that relationship?
Okay. So what I would do is start working on like regulation, impulse control. That's a long-term goal. and then reprocessing or treating the compulsivity if that's needing to be addressed, and then the reconstruction and meaning making. And so on a smaller scale,
Okay.
I'm going to uh, bring up a couple of things of what that would look like.
Okay.
So we brought up like guilt and shame. And so it will
Hmm.
be important to address some of those things, coping with feelings of anxiety, depression, guilt, and shame, and then creating some healthy cognitive patterns and beliefs that the person has about the use of pornography. Okay, because we did talk earlier about the sex positivity. Usually the guilt and the shame is about something negative, the negative cognitive patterns that a person has or about their values and so forth. And so we would need
Hmm.
to address those things. And
Hmm.
then also coming up with some triggers for
Okay.
inappropriate sexual habits. I want for them to have some other positive ways that they're dealing with stress so that they're not using pornography to address stress management. And
So
then
sorry,
go ahead.
what would be, Erin, just because you mentioned triggers,
Hmm.
for example, what could be some common triggers for men or women, and how could someone manage those triggers?
Okay. One of my clients in particular said that a trigger for his pornography use was simply being on social media and having some of these pop ups of ads, suggestive ads. And then he just said his mind would just stray. And then he would, within 15, 20 minutes, he would go into a porn site, switch over and go into a porn site. So being on social media quite a bit and then seeing some of the things that he was seeing, those were triggers for him. And so what he decided to do was get off of social media,
Okay.
okay, or change the settings of his social media so that the algorithm was changed on his social media. So that was an example of that.
A less tempting algorithm.
Yes. Yeah. So that
Okay.
things weren't popping up. And then, that was just one of his guardrails. And so a trigger for him, and then he put a guardrail in place.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the idea of guardrail. I think that's an interesting concept. Well, I think many men, for example, and I probably did, this is related to the early days of the adolescence, but probably for maybe not just men, but probably anybody, will being alone at home when it's probably a trigger, right? So
Boredom. Yeah.
boredom also,
Hmm.
yeah. And have you encountered this sort of issue with women as well, with some of your clients, or do you tend to see some sort of differences?
I do not usually see problems with the use of pornography with women.
Okay.
I think I may have had one situation in the last several years, but it's not usually women, and women are not as visual, visually stimulated sexually as men are. Women are
Okay.
more, um, they're into fantasy more than men are. Men are very visually stimulated, and so pornography is not as attractive to women as it is to men.
Okay. That makes sense.
And I have
Interesting.
to explain that too to women that
Hmm.
men are just, the way that they are, they just tend to be more visually stimulated. That's why when you're walking down the street, you know, a guy will stare and do a double take, and it's obvious that that's what he's doing. And women don't usually do that. A woman can kind of glance at somebody and she will be able to describe everything about the person without staring and doing double takes because that's just
Hmm.
not how they usually are. But men are
Okay.
very, very, very visual.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. So I think we can take some very interesting ideas from from this discussion. I
Hmm.
really like the concept of guardrails, and I think we have
Yes.
covered a lot today. I mean, this will be the first take or approach to a topic we will be covering throughout a series of discussions about, well, the relationship we have with porn as a society, well, individually, in our relationships. So I hope you guys find this episode of value interesting. Thanks, Erin, for your amazing insights today. And I think people will enjoy a lot hearing the next episodes about this topic. So thank you.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you guys for being today. Bye.